Makes Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. Chapter 30. Fathers. One of the toughest challenges I faced in trying to get my overall act together was coming to grips with fatherhood. After my new job helped me get on my feet, I was able to do more for Monroe, but I still had trouble relating to him one-on-one. I suspected the difficulty stemmed from some buried, unresolved issues in my head about my blood father, whom we called JL. I could also tell that in very different ways, two of my brothers, Billy and Dwight, wrestled with these issues too. Although I never acknowledged it, I think that on some level it bugged me that I was an adult and didn't know my old man from Adam. He and my mother divorced when I was less than 2 years old. As the oldest of my mother's 3 children by JL, Billy was the only one with any memories of our father being in the same household as us. Around 1982, a few years before Billy moved his family to Portsmouth from New York, he started making it a point during visits home to track down JL and began establishing the relationship they never had. In fact, it was Billy who first took me to meet my father, whom I hadn't seen in more than 25 years. Talk about a trip. That one rated right up there with acid and wacky weed. When we went by his house, JL looked at me, smiled broadly, pushed open the screen door, and greeted us with the heartiness of long-lost friends. "Hey, come on in, come on in." I stepped inside first, followed by Billy. It felt weird being face-to-face with my old man for the first time in years. Standing in the middle of the modestly furnished living room, I wondered, what now? Was I supposed to hug this guy, shake his hand, or punch him in the face? I extended my hand and said, "How you doing, JL?" Fine, I'm doing just fine, Nathan. You looking good. Have a seat." We sat down, Billy and me on the couch, and JL in an easy chair. Still smiling, JL said, "So what's been going on?" I said, "Not much." There was an awkward silence. Billy, eyeing the uneasy exchanges like a referee in a boxing match, broke the quiet with a lie. "We were planning to come over this way, so I thought I'd call and see if you were going to be around." "Oh yeah? I just got home from work a little while ago. If you'd called 15 minutes earlier, you'd have missed me." JL, a longshoreman, started running down the details of his workday, trying, I suspected, to avoid eerie silences. It wasn't easy. We were total strangers, brought together by bloodlines that seemed seriously thin. Yet he was my father, my old man. It seemed weird that we had so little to say, but what was there for strangers to talk about? Sitting there, I studied every detail about JL, looking for traces of myself. Medium height and fat, he looked nothing like I'd imagined. He had dark brown skin and light brown eyes like mine, but beyond that, he could have been any stranger on the street. When he spoke, a gold crown sparkled in his mouth, an indication, I guess, that he was real hip when he was young. JL was married and had a daughter and a son, both a few years younger than me. They lived in a 2-story frame house just off of Tidewater Drive, a main street that runs through the center of Norfolk. Sitting there, I thought about how many times I've driven past that street over the years with no idea my father was somewhere near. I also thought about a disappointing day, 19 years earlier, when we were supposed to have reunited. Shortly after we moved to Virginia in 1964, JL telephoned my mother and said he wanted to spend time with Billy, Dwight, and me. My mother let him speak with Billy, who was then 13. After he hung up, Billy came running to Dwight and me. He said our daddy had promised to pick us up soon and take us downtown to shop for school clothes. He asked me what y'all wanted to buy. Dwight, who was 11 then, said, "I want a leather coat." I was 9. I took my cue from Dwight. "I want a leather coat too." In the 2 weeks before the visit, We wagged our tongues and bragged to our friends about our planned outing to see our real daddy. To hear us tell it, JL was going to do everything. All the special things that daddies were supposed to do. We hadn't laid eyes on him since I was an infant, but he was going to make up for all those missed moments. The first teat pull, the first report card, the first unsteady bicycle balancing act, and this shopping trip was just the beginning. The days leading up to the visit were torture, like 1,000 nights before Christmas. In that time, I wondered a lot of things about my daddy. I lay in bed at night and stare up at the ceiling, wondering how he looked, how he talked, and what his life was like. When the day arrived, Mama drove us to downtown Portsmouth. JL lived less than 10 miles away in Norfolk. We had to catch the tunnel bus to get there. Mama told us that JL would be waiting for us at the bus stop, and she added, "If he's not there, don't leave that corner until he comes." We reached our stop and boarded off the bus and looked around for JL. There was no one there. I had to go to the bathroom. There was a department store set back about 20 feet from the corner. Billy kept watch on the corner while I followed Dwight inside to ask the clerk if we could use the bathroom. She led us to a tiny room, smiled, and closed the door behind us. I yanked down my zipper and frantically pulled at my drawers to get it out before the pressure broke. Pee squirted everywhere before I could aim it at the commode. Dwight grew impatient. "Hurry up, boy. JL might be out there waiting." I quickly stuffed it back inside my pants and pulled up the zipper and felt warm drops of pee roll down my leg. We sprinted out the door and ran up to Billy. "Did he get here yet?" Billy was getting antsy. "You don't see him, do you?" An half-hour passed and JL didn't show. As we waited, my mind raced ahead. There was so much to talk about. I wanted to tell him how smart I was in school. I wanted to tell him about our new house in Cavalier Manor. I wish I had some binoculars. I wanted to be the first one to spot JL, the first one to step up to the car and greet him when he pulled to the curb. I knew what I was going to say. I was going to walk up to the car door and say, "Hi, JL, I'm Nathan." An hour passed and there was still no sign. We stood there, looking at the passing cars and believing with faith that could move mountains that sooner or later our daddy would come. Whenever a car came in our direction, I'd lean over and look inside. Most of the folks driving by were white people. I spotted the black man driving the car that was coming our way. As he slowed the car, my heart pounded and my face brightened. I took a step forward and waited to make sure he saw us. The man turned the corner near us and drove on by. When the wait grew longer, doubt began to set in. Nobody said it. The silence revealed it. As time passed, nobody said much of anything. We just stood there, waiting, watching, hoping. After 2 hours had passed, it started raining. Without consulting Dwight and me, Billy walked slowly to a payphone near the department store and dialed our home. In the half hour it took my mother to get there, I kept my fingers crossed, hoping JL would beat her to that corner. Every time a car pulled near us to the curb, my heart leaped, and every time one drove away without my brothers and me in it, my spirit sank. Finally, my mother came into view, and we all dragged reluctantly to the car. We rode home in deathly silence. I stared out the window and wondered if we should have waited longer for my daddy. I wonder if maybe he might get there moments after we left and find us gone. I wonder if he had a flat tire or something and couldn't get to us. I wondered a lot of things. My mother and stepfather didn't explain to us then or later what had happened with JL. One night, I overheard them talking about it in hushed tones, but that was it. My brothers and I didn't talk amongst ourselves about the letdown. In fact, the only person who said anything about it afterwards was me. One day, out of the clear blue, I told my mother, "I ain't never going nowhere to wait for him again." but I never had to confront such a choice. I never saw or heard from JL again until I went with Billy to see him that day in 1982. I'd often wondered how my brothers and I had been influenced by JL's aloofness. Billy seemed most affected, in a desperate yet positive way. It was as if he used JL as a model for the type of father he didn't want to become. Billy was devoted to his 3 children, and he seemed determined to make sure they knew their way for grandfather too. But it seemed just the opposite for Dwight, who'd been married briefly and had a son. Dwight seemed wholly unable to relate to the fatherhood trip. He'd go for months without seeing his son, who lived with his mother in Cavalier Manor, less than a mile from Dwight's apartment. He was almost as indifferent to his son as JL had been with us. I think I was a frustrated combination of Billy and Dwight. There were so many unresolved issues haunting me. There were the 2 girls who had told me when we were teenagers that they were pregnant by me. Although I doubted that was so, I never resolved it with medical tests. After getting out of prison, I contacted a woman to try to settle the matter, but gave up quickly. I suspected it was because I was scared to face what it might reveal and require of me. I was aware of the major contradiction. I believed that I courageously confronted life, yet I shrank from fatherhood, one of life's greatest challenges. Then there was Monroe. He was certainly my child, yet I struggled to feel the bond that I thought fathers were supposed to feel with their children. At times, I looked at him and felt no more connected to him than to a stranger. I wondered, had all those efforts on the streets to harden my heart taken their toll? Or had JL passed along to me some fucked up cold-hearted gene? I fought to shed the warped values that had guided me before prison. Probably the same ones my father had embraced when he was young. To us, children were double-edged swords, to be flaunted and dodged at the same time. They confirmed our manhood, yet they threatened to rob us of what precious little freedom we thought we had. Your options are narrowed greatly with crumb snatchers in tow. You've got to play by the establishment's rules to keep children clothed and fed. You've got to work, and therefore subject yourself to the white man. Children, like love, make you vulnerable to the world. And what black man wants to be more vulnerable than he already is? My struggle to connect with Monroe brought to mind a time when I was in Norfolk jail and had begun studying the Bible. One of the street ministers who visited the jail told a bunch of inmates that we would need to get the Holy Ghost and speak in tongues in order to confirm our salvation. For a time, I closed my eyes tight and strained like hell, trying to force myself to speak in tongues so that I could be saved. Eventually, it dawned on me that salvation is less about what you feel than what you know. Then I relaxed, resting assured that I was saved. At first, I strained hard with Monroe, hoping that paternal bond would kick in. I went to his elementary school occasionally to check on him and pick him up from his grandmother's some weekends so that he could spend time with me. While I busied myself around the apartment, he leafed through my record albums and played songs he liked. That's when we discovered we had something in common, a love of music. We played records and talked about which recording artists we liked best. Over time, he warmed to me. We established a rapport as I gradually learned how to relate to him. Then I relaxed, resting assured in what I knew, that I loved that little 9-year-old and that if I tried hard enough, I could make a critical difference in his life. Then the growth of our bond was suddenly stunted. Liz got married, moved to California, and made plans to send for Monroe. He didn't want to go, and I didn't want him to leave. Yet I knew I had no right or authority to raise objections to Liz, who had been far more responsible than I'd been in caring for him. Whenever I tried to inject my views, she sharply reminded me, "You haven't been around for him." I backed off every time. I didn't see Monroe the day he left. I felt too strange and fragile inside to see him off. My mother took pictures of him standing near his luggage before his flight to LA. I looked at the photos later and saw the sadness on his face. It was a sullen, almost pleading look. I was saddened too. Just when we were getting to know each other, he was gone, and I was left to battle ghosts that seemed to be taunting me. Distressing images of uncaring black fathers and the memory of my own detached old man who fed such stereotypes. A lot of those memories raced through my head while sitting there in JL's living room. As Billy looked on quietly, JL asked me questions about my life. Where do you work? Where do you live? I answered in a monotone that made the exchanges seem more like a formal interview. I wanted to ask a few questions myself, such as, where the hell have you been? But I didn't. If he didn't offer an explanation, why ask? Anyway, it seemed not to matter much anymore. I didn't need him now. I survived the period when I needed him most. I suppose I felt hurt by his absence, but I figured I'd come to grips with that while in prison. I concluded that blood is not always thicker than water, and that fatherhood is not determined by bloodlines alone. Fatherhood is a state of mind. In that respect, Bonnie Alvin, the man who raised me, was my father. JL and I talked on, straining to keep a conversation flowing. Then I left with Billy, feeling somewhat better that another missing piece in my life had been supplied. I visited JL on my own a few times after that. We got along well, better in fact than he and my other brothers did. He seemed suspicious of them because they each had borrowed money from him and failed to repay it. Unlike them, I never asked him for anything. For some reason, probably stubborn pride, I wanted always to be able to say I made it through life without any help with him. During one visit, we sat on the porch and talked dreamily about things we wanted to do in life. I told him I would like to do some simple things that I missed out on while growing up in the streets. Maybe go camping or fishing. He sat up and looked at me. You want to go fishing? I go fishing all the time. It amazed me that this guy assumed we could form an ongoing relationship after all these years without him offering an explanation to bridge the gap. He seemed completely unaware that people need to know where they sprang from and who they're connected to. In all the years his 3 sons had lived in the next city, it never occurred to him that we needed to see him and our paternal grandparents in order to complete the picture of who we were. Because of him, my brothers and I never laid eye on JL's mother and father, who lived a few hours' drive away in North Carolina. What's more, JL had never seen Monroe, my son, and it seemed not to bother him at all. Pitiful, I thought. Just pitiful. When I left his house that day, he called out as I climbed into the car, "Call me when you're ready to go fishing." I thought, call him? Call him? The few times in life I've ever seen this man is when I called or visited him. No, I won't call him. He needs to call me. I decided that I would never see JL again unless he initiated the visit. I'd wait and let him figure out that that was what he needed to do. Initiate. That was in 1982. I haven't seen or spoken to him since that day. Okay, that brings us to the end of chapter 30. And my immediate thought is that I really hope his father reached out to him at some point so they could continue their relationship and grow. But another thing that I think about is that I don't think it's natural for us to not want to be in our children's lives. When that happens, something wrong has gone on in the father's life or mother as well. Like a parent who doesn't want to be involved with their children, something that's going wrong with them that detaches them from their child. You know, if we were living in our ideal environment, this wouldn't even be a thought. But we do have all these traumas that's been passed down and experienced through the years to where we're not operating in our right mind. I encourage any of you out there who's listening to this, if you are a father or you have a father that you don't really have a relationship with, you should do something to figure out, well, why don't I have a relationship with this person? Or why don't I have a relationship with my son or daughter? They came for me. They need to know who I am. Because one of the interesting things is that, in the study of epigenetics, we get taught that all of your experiences get passed down to your children, I guess up to that moment of conception. So, they're literally you and their mother and all the people that came before. So they do need to know you. Now, you can make a difference in their lives, but, it does require you to be better. And if your father wasn't there for you, use that as an example of what you don't want to do and strive to be better. Because that's all we can do is, do our best. But are you really doing your best? That's something you have to answer for yourself. If that answer is no, work harder. Society doesn't really, they don't really give us much, time to just be leisurely and not expect to have bad consequences. Men, we do have a different type of burden on us to where we have to be better. We have to be working to improve ourselves, because by us improving ourselves, we improve the lives of our children and what happens down in the generations. You should strive to be that reason that your family is set up on another level because of something that you did. And you have that power, you have that capability. You are powerful beyond measure. And I don't just say that to be, cliche. If you weren't so powerful, there wouldn't be so many systems set in place to try to keep a foot on our necks. That's the scary thing to them. That, we're still operating at somewhat of a good level after everything that we've been through. But again, you are powerful beyond measure. Your children need you, and they need you to, strive to be your best self. And that doesn't mean wait until you think you're your best self to come around. They can see you improving, and that in turn will teach them that, okay, well, it's okay not to be perfect, but to keep striving to be my best self. But anyway, y'all let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see y'all in the next chapter. Peace.